If you want to understand how modern politics actually works,
Yeah.
I want you to picture a Mexican standoff in a corporate boardroom.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
The classic standoff.
Right. So on one side, you have this aggressive, heavily industrialized economic engine, and they are demanding immediate expansion, like growth at all costs.
And on the other side,
You have the federal government,
right.
armed with, strict climate mandates and totally prepared to shut that expansion down completely. Both sides have their weapons drawn.
Which usually ends in what? Gridlock?
Gridlock, capital flight, or just a really messy court battle. But today, for this deep dive, we are looking at a scenario where these two historical opponents slowly lowered their weapons and walked out with a synchronized multi-billion-dollar master plan.
It is genuinely fascinating. We are unpacking the transcript of a truly monumental press conference from May 15th, 2026.
Right.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith stood together to announce this sweeping new energy collaboration deal.
A deal that tries to bridge, basically, immense economic ambition with super stringent environmental goals.
Exactly. And just to set the stage for you listening, because this touches the absolute third rail of energy and environmental politics.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't get more politically charged than this.
Right. So our goal today isn't to judge whose underlying philosophy is right or wrong. We are strictly here to act as neutral guides.
We just want to reverse engineer the math of this specific deal.
Yeah, we want to show you the blueprint they're proposing, the actual mechanical trade-offs they made, and how they bridge this seemingly impossible gap.
So to understand the architecture of this grand compromise, we kind of have to start with the physical reality that anchors the whole thing.
Yes, the physical centerpiece.
Right, because everything in this incredibly complex policy document revolves around a massive new infrastructure project, the proposed West Coast oil pipeline.
It's a massive project. We're talking about a pipeline designed to transport over 1 million barrels of oil per day to Asian markets.
1 million barrels a day.
Yeah. And the timeline outlined in the transcript is just built for absolute speed.
Like aggressively fast, right?
Extremely. So a comprehensive proposal is due to the Federal Major Projects Office by Canada Day.
Which is July 1st.
Right. And then by October 1st, Canada commits to designating it a project of national interest under the Building Canada Act.
Okay, wow.
And if that sequence holds, construction could actually commence as early as September 1st, 2027.
September 2027.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. Let's stop right there. Because looking at this from just a purely political calculus,
Right, the politics of it.
in 2026, how does fast-tracking a 1 million barrel a day fossil fuel pipeline make any sense for a modern climate-conscious leader? Prime Minister Carney couldn't just greenlight something of that scale without totally alienating his entire climate-focused base.
No, he absolutely couldn't.
Right, so how did these two leaders actually agree on this? He must have tied the approval to some massive structural concessions. I mean, especially regarding the land the pipeline crosses, right?
That is exactly what happened. The pipeline was his ultimate leverage point.
Okay.
Premier Smith gets the green light for the infrastructure that acts as the primary economic engine for her province. She gets access to those lucrative Asian markets. But the transcript explicitly outlines Carney's conditions for that access.
Which are what?
Well, the pipeline approval actually requires binding frameworks that ensure indigenous economic benefits and structural opportunities for project co-ownership.
Ah, co-ownership. That's a big shift.
Huge. And he also mandates that British Columbians, the people who actually share the coastline and absorb the physical footprint of the project.
They have to get a piece of the pie.
Exactly. They must share in the substantial economic upside.
So Carney is essentially trading physical infrastructure for socioeconomic restructuring. He's saying, sure, Alberta gets the economic engine, but the federal government writes the contracts on how the wealth from that engine gets distributed.
That's spot on. But that physical trade-off is really only the first layer of the deal.
Right, because we haven't even touched the carbon pricing yet.
Yeah, the pipeline itself was only made possible because both sides agreed to entirely rewrite the rulebook on carbon pricing.
It's wild.
The sheer volume of capital being moved around in the regulatory space here is just unprecedented.
Let's talk about Premier Smith's wins here, because the concessions she secured are massive. The old federal policy, the one that mandated a carbon price of $170 per ton by the year 2030.
Totally scrapped.
Completely gone. And according to the transcript, avoiding that specific federally mandated price hike will save Alberta's industry partners roughly $250 billion in compliance costs between now and 2050.
$250 billion. That is not a small number.
No, it's staggering. And on top of that, the federal government agreed to remove the clean electricity regulations and the proposed oil and gas emissions cap.
So that level of deregulation gives the industrial sector massive, immediate relief. But I want to be clear, the federal government didn't abandon carbon pricing altogether.
No, they did.
They just restructured the timeline to guarantee long-term compliance.
You know, it reads perfectly like renegotiating a really punishing commercial mortgage.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Like the industry goes to the federal bank and says, hey, this $170 a month payment plan by 2030 is going to bankrupt us. And the bank agrees to stretch out the term.
Right, give them some breathing room.
Exactly. So under this new deal, the headline, carbon price stays flat at $95 per ton until the end of 2026.
Okay.
Then it steps up to $100 for 3 years and eventually reaches $130 per ton by 2035. So they lowered the immediate interest rate to give the homeowner room to breathe and, invest in the property.
While strictly guaranteeing the bank that the final balance will still get paid.
Yes, exactly.
The mortgage analogy captures that timeline shift perfectly. Carney even notes in the press conference that they are aiming for an effective market price of $130 per ton by 2040.
Right.
But to understand why the federal government was willing to restructure that mortgage so drastically, you really have to look at the mechanical failure of the existing carbon markets.
Oh, this is the really interesting part.
Yeah. Carney reveals that under a previous memorandum of understanding from November 2025, the actual carbon credit market was collapsing.
He mentions this massive oversupply of credits, right, that crashed the market price down to just $20 a ton.
Yes, $20 a ton. And this is a classic failure point in cap and trade systems.
How so?
Well, government sets a high theoretical penalty for carbon emissions, say $170 a ton.
Yeah.
But companies don't always just pay that straight to the government. They trade credits on an open market to meet their compliance targets.
Okay, right.
So if a regulatory body issues way too many of these credits, or if you have overlapping policies that just flood the market.
The supply drastically outweighs the demand.
Exactly. And the actual trading price just plummets.
So, having a theoretical $170 per ton target by 2030 is completely meaningless if the actual market mechanism allows heavy emitters to just buy their way out of compliance for $20 a ton today.
Exactly. The penalty for polluting effectively vanishes.
So Carney's primary objective in this new agreement wasn't setting an impossibly high theoretical price. It was fixing the broken mechanics of the market itself.
Right?
And the tool they're using to do that is the introduction of what they call carbon contracts for difference.
Yeah, these are fascinating.
A carbon contract for difference is basically a financial insurance policy.
Right.
The government guarantees a fixed future price for carbon to companies that go ahead and invest the billions required for clean technology.
So they have certainty.
Exactly. If the open market price of carbon falls below that guaranteed strike price, like it did when it crashed to $20, the government actually pays the company the difference.
It completely de-risks the capital investment for the industry.
Which is huge.
It is. And the transcript notes they're issuing 75 million tons of these contracts. But the mechanism that makes this specific deal unique, the really groundbreaking part, is how the liability for those contracts is structured.
Okay, break that down for us.
The financial risk is being shared equally, 50-50, between the federal and provincial governments.
So Carney uses the phrase, "we will have skin in the game."
Yes, skin in the game.
By splitting that liability, they have essentially built a financial trap that they willingly stepped into together.
A mutually assured trap.
Yeah, right, because if the provincial or federal governments mismanage the regulations again and create another oversupply of credits, and the price crashes.
Both governments are legally on the hook. They have to pay out billions in different contracts to the industry.
They engineered a system of mutual financial destruction.
Exactly. Both governments are now intensely financially motivated to make sure the carbon market actually functions properly and the price remains stable.
Okay, so the federal government gives up $250 billion in guaranteed compliance revenue through deregulation, but in exchange, they lock Alberta into a shared liability that stabilizes the entire national carbon market.
It's a brilliant trade-off, really.
It is, but that $250 billion in savings, it isn't just going back into shareholder dividends.
No, definitely not.
The federal government demanded that those savings be diverted directly into physical emissions-reducing technology. Which brings us to the green tech reality of this grand compromise.
Yes, where the money actually goes.
Yeah.
And the centerpiece of that tech push is the Oil Sands Alliance, which was formerly known as the Pathways Companies.
Right.
Both governments have officially committed to advancing the world's largest carbon capture, utilization, and Storage Infrastructure Project, or CCUS.
And we aren't just talking about like pilot projects or theoretical models here. The scale they are proposing in the transcript is staggering.
It's massive.
Carney states that this specific alliance will achieve emissions reductions equivalent to taking 90% of the vehicles off Alberta's roads.
90%. Achieving that kind of reduction requires an industrial mobilization on a scale we rarely see.
Yeah, the economic impact numbers are huge. They are projecting over $16 billion in GDP generation and creating up to 50,000 jobs across Canada.
And the text specifically highlights long-term careers across the skilled trades and engineering. It's a massive job creator.
Right, and they're looking well beyond just carbon capture, too.
Oh, yeah. The transcript outlines the establishment of a joint electricity working group between the two governments. They are exploring an all-of-the-above approach to the energy grid.
So they list nuclear, geothermal, abated natural gas, wind, solar, and hydrogen.
Everything is on the table.
Everything. Plus, they detail a methane equivalency agreement targeting a 75% reduction in methane emissions below 2014 levels by the year 2035.
The breadth of the technological integration here is just incredibly ambitious.
It is, but I have to jump in here with a skeptical eye. Because looking at this, there is a glaring vulnerability in this master plan.
Okay, what do you see?
We have a major timeline mismatch.
Right.
Think about it. Alberta gets the regulatory green light for a massive physical 1 million barrel a day pipeline starting immediately.
Yep.
But the federal government just gets a promise that a monumental carbon capture network will eventually offset those emissions sometime in the next decade.
I see where you're going.
Like, are these carbon capture promises just a futuristic magic wand used to justify pulling more oil out of the ground today? Without a brutal enforcement mechanism, there is literally nothing stopping the industrial sector from building the pipeline, reaping all the profits, and continuously delaying the expensive carbon capture tech.
It's a totally valid point, but if you look at the text, Prime Minister Carney clearly anticipated that exact skepticism.
Did he?
He did. The agreement is not built on delayed promises. It is built on what the text calls binding annual benchmarks.
Binding annual benchmarks. Okay, so the green light for the pipeline isn't unconditional.
Far from it. It is tethered directly to the Oil Sands Alliance successfully hitting their yearly carbon capture targets.
So how does that enforcement actually work in practice, like mechanically?
Well, Carney states explicitly that the proposed pipeline depends on that alliance. So it operates as a closed-loop system of accountability.
A closed...
Right. If the industry fails to build the carbon capture technology on schedule, or if they miss their binding annual emissions benchmarks, the pipeline faces immediate consequences.
Like what kind of consequence?
This could mean regulatory approvals for subsequent phases stall completely, or operational throughput is mechanically throttled by the federal regulator.
Oh, wow. So the economic engine is physically hardwired to the environmental compliance monitor?
Yes.
It forces the industry to prove the technology actually works on schedule, or their core asset just gets stranded.
Exactly. It is the crucial architectural feature of the entire deal.
Yeah.
The whole framework, the pipeline approvals, the shared liability contracts, the hardwired enforcement mechanism, all of it relies on one foundational element that transitions the entire tone of the press conference.
Yeah, there's a big shift in tone near the end. Prime Minister Carney brings up a quote from Fatih Birol, the head of the International Energy Agency.
Yes, this was a great moment.
Birol recently visited Canada and stated that the most important commodity in the world right now isn't oil, natural gas, or even lithium.
The most important commodity is trust.
Trust.
Yeah. And in the context of global energy markets, trust isn't just a political platitude. It is a highly valuable financial asset.
Because trust translates directly to regulatory stability.
Absolutely. Capital is notoriously cowardly, right? It flees from volatility.
Yeah.
A nation could sit on the richest oil reserves on the entire planet, but if their internal politics are chaotic and regulations change every single election cycle,
investors are going to pull their money.
In a heartbeat.
So by promising a framework of one project, one review, both levels of government are signaling to global investors, specifically those Asian markets looking for long-term energy security, that Canada has finally resolved its internal standoff.
They're projecting ironclad policy stability.
And Carney really drives this point home at the end of the transcript. He shifts away from the dense policy entirely and shares a personal anecdote.
I loved this part. He talks about being born in Fort Smith, up in the Northwest Territories, near the oil sands.
Right.
And he mentions that when he was born, the oil sands were essentially just a concept, like a curiosity in the dirt that only a few builders actually believed in,
Yeah, he recounts being in junior high school in Edmonton with Alex Korb.
who later became a massive figure in the energy sector.
Exactly. And Carney talks about watching the oil sands transform from that wild, almost impossible idea into one of Canada's largest industries within a single generation.
Built by brilliant scientists, driven entrepreneurs, and highly skilled workers.
The implication of that story is so powerful because he is reminding an audience that might be deeply suspicious of federal climate mandates, mind you, that they already possess a proven legacy of impossible engineering.
Right. He's saying if you had the capacity and brilliance to figure out how to economically separate heavy oil from sand on a massive scale.
Which was incredibly difficult.
Insanely difficult.
Yeah.
But if you could do that, you possess the exact same drive required to pull carbon out of the atmosphere at scale.
He brilliantly frames the energy transition not as the death of their industry, but as their next great engineering moonshot.
It's a masterclass in rhetorical framing. It's designed to secure that essential commodity of trust from the people who actually had to build the infrastructure.
It really grounds a super dense, multi-billion-dollar policy document in a human life cycle.
It makes it real.
So why does this highly specific 2026 agreement between Ottawa and Alberta actually matter to you, listening right now?
Good question.
Well, whether you live in North America, Asia, or anywhere else, you are basically watching the real-time instruction manual for the global energy transition being written. You are witnessing the exact mechanics of how modern nations desperately try to balance massive energy demands with existential climate realities.
And the instruction manual they've drafted leaves us with a really compelling question.
Yeah, it does.
In this transcript, we watch two historically opposing forces engineer a new model of cooperative federalism. They broke their standoff, not through vague promises, but through mutual financial risk.
Putting real skin in the game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shared liability contracts and hardwiring major infrastructure approvals to binding emission benchmarks. So, the provocative thought I'll leave you with is this. Could this specific blueprint of forced mechanical accountability become the exact template for how the rest of the world navigates the global energy transition?
I mean, can the aggressive economic engine and the strict environmental compliance regulator genuinely bind themselves together to build a future that compromises on neither profit nor survival?
The mechanisms are in place now.
Yeah, they are. But only time and those binding annual benchmarks will tell. Thank you for joining us as we deconstructed this blueprint today. Keep questioning the mechanics of the systems around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.